In this recording, I'd like to talk about how you can integrate the data from your Microsoft Access program with other programs. Microsoft Access data often needs to be shared with websites. The book talks about that. It's fairly simple, so I'm not going to talk about it. But often, in my case, I've had some databases that I built a long time ago that were created to work with Microsoft Access, but then I wanted to import them to a database program that works on the web. Other people create, and we'll do an example of this, other people create their data in Excel because other people in their company aren't comfortable with Access, though with forms and everything else. I don't know why that would be the case, but they enter the data into an Excel table and we want to be able to import it. To order to do those kinds of things, one of the most common ways to import data, and I'm going to once again be using my pizza orders file, so let me get that open. One of the most common ways to import data is using text, pure text. But that text needs to be structured in some way so that Access can read it. And there are two most common ways, both discussed in the book, are XML format and CSV format. And what I want to talk about here is, first of all, how to export and import those kinds of files, and also take a look at the files themselves to see how they're different. So just as an example, what I want to do here is open my tables, and remember you can use these little chevrons to hide things if things get a little complex, like my table's starting to get now. And let's say that I want to export my customers table because I want to use it someplace else. It may be on a mainframe computer, it may be on a website, it may just be a program that's completely different but does have these import capabilities. To export a table, you can either use the external data tab, and there's export stuff here, or what's easier is to simply, this is what I want to export, right click it and export. You can export just about anything. You can export queries, you can export forms, reports, but there's limits to what kinds of things you can get out of them. Normally, if you're exporting data to a different program, you're going to be using either text, either a table, a query, and exporting it as text. First one I wanted to do is XML. So I'm going to export my customer table as an XML file. And it wants to know where to put it. I'm going to just drop it on my desktop here. You can put it anywhere you want. But I'm going to put it on the desktop so I can find it. And I'll take the prefix off because the file name really doesn't need to have that prefix. And hit save. And then the wizard will ask me potentially a few more questions here, like any of this stuff, including more options. When you're exporting to XML, one of the options you have is to create two separate files. One that describes the structure of your table and another file that contains the data. Access and most SQ or XML import programs allow you to do both in the same file. So what I'm going to do is go to the schema tab here in the export and say that I want to embed my schema. Schema is the technical database term for the structure, the layout of your table, what fields, what size of the fields, what's the primary key, all the validation stuff that you might have in there. All of that's embedded in the schema. And I want to embed that in the same file. So I'm going to click on OK. And if you wish, you can save the export steps if this is something you're going to be doing often. But in this case, I'm only going to be exporting my data once, so I don't need to save the steps. And now it's done. Well, where did it go? Went to my desktop, so I'm going to go check the desktop. And here's my customer XML file. And we can look inside there, but let's save that for a second. This is XML. Let me also create an exported CSV file. CSV stands for comma separated values. So what's going to happen here is the database is going to be exported with the data separated by commas. In this case, they don't have to be comma separated. They can be separated by other fields, but typically it's comma. So once again, I'm going to export, and this time let's just use this one. CSV is nothing but a text file with a special extension, CSV, for comma separated values, but it's literally a text file. Where you want to put it, once again, I'll put it on my desktop. I'm still on my desktop. Okay. Nice thing about Access is until you close it, it remembers the last place you saved stuff, so you don't have to keep changing directories all the time. And I want this to be a CSV file, so I'm going to say customers.csv. And notice, since there's so many different types of text files, you have to specify the extension here. I didn't specify the extension for XML because I was only exporting XML. Save that. Normally when you're exporting data like this, you don't format it, but if you are exporting forms or reports, then you do want them formatted, but I don't in this case. Click on OK. Here's all your data. Is that what you want? Separated by commas. Looks good to me. Most of the time Access does a nice job on that. Okay. What's it separated by commas? Okay. We can change that to semicolons or tabs or even other characters. And if we wish, we can include the field names in the first row, and that's often pretty handy, so I'm going to include those, and they get their own comma-separated values with quotes around them. Next, and then where do you want to save it? We already told it. Finish. Again, I'm not going to save the export steps. Now let's take a look at those two files that were created. It's a customer's XML file. Notice in Office 2013, which is what I'm using here, Excel claims to own CSV files. I can try to open this, or I can actually open it in Excel. And each one of the data values gets put into its own column. These are formatted a little funky, but that's not a problem. All the data's here, the field names are there. That's the CSV file, and this is the XML file, and it opens probably in Notepad or WordPad. One of the things the book shows you how to do, I think comes in very handy, is the ability to open one of these with Notepad. Remember, these are pure text files. This is the XML file. It is a structured file that has all kinds of these little tags. Each one of these tags means something. You have to have a program on the other end, an XML import file that recognizes these tags and sorts them out. For us, most of this stuff doesn't mean anything. All right, but if we scroll down here, you can see that there is an element called customer ID, and it has its width, and it has all this other auto number, etc. Then there's an element for the customer first name, there's an element for the customer last name, and there's a customer phone number. So for every field in our table at the top of this XML file, because we exported the schema, there's a description of every single field. And then a little later, also inside of tags, based on the field names, are the data. Here's one, here's Aaron Rodgers' phone number, end of that row, and then another row. Here's the ID number, here's the first name, last name, phone number, and so on for every piece of data. There's 140 customers here, so that's quite a bit. Okay, so that's the difference between the two. The customers file includes descriptions of the table. The CSV file, I'm going to open it with Notepad just so you can see, doesn't include any description of the table. It only includes the data. Okay, so there's no description of the data here, so XML is a lot more powerful when you export. You want to try to copy a table from one location to another. XML is a little more powerful, and we'll see that here in just a second. CSS is simpler, it's easy. If all you're transferring is data, this is just as easy and just as powerful as XML. You can use them interchangeably, but some programs out there do not have an XML import feature. Just about all of them that have the ability to bring in data like this, like Excel, like other data programs, database programs like MySQL and a few others that are out there, MS SQL, have the ability to import CSV files. So that's what they look like. Okay, so that now we've exported them, and we can use those two files to share that data with other programs. If my data changes and I want to share the changes, I have to do that export process over again. So that would be good if it happens frequently and we have to export frequently. Might be worth saving those steps. And I've also created a new table called sodas. It makes a list of all the sodas we have in our database, and I've saved them in both the CSV format and the XML format. Again, I can open these real quick in Notepad. The XML includes all the table definition stuff, but the CSV file only includes the data. Very simple data. There's a soda ID number, it's an auto number field, and there's a soda name. And that's it. Okay? So let's see what happens if we try to import that soda table into Access. Go into Microsoft Access. There's no soda table here, so I want to import it. And let's start with the XML file. All right, go find it on the desktop. I want sodas XML. Okay. There's the stuff. I want the structure and the data, so I want the schema and the data. Click on OK. And that's it. because that XML file contains everything we need, here's our TBL sodas. Notice even the table name has the correct name. If we go in Design View, soda ID is there as auto number, the soda name is short text, size 15. All of that was stored in the XML file. In addition, all the data is here in the right fields. So XML is very powerful, particularly if you're sharing data from one database program from another. It'll create the entire table. By the way, if you want to copy a table from one Access program, one Access database to another, you're much better off using the import Access, and it'll give you a list of all the objects in the database, and you can just transfer the table. This is only for transferring to other programs. Okay, so let's delete this now and import it one more time to see the difference when we use CSV. Remember, CSV only has the data, so you should expect a number of differences here. I'm going to import a text file. Where is it? It's here, sodas. Okay. Import the source into a new table, append it. I don't have an existing table or link to it. I don't recommend linking to text files, though you can. I'm going to import it into a new table. And now, because there's nothing in there but data, Access is going to need a little more information. But we do have the field names, and here's the data. It's comma separated. Okay, is that right? Correct. First name, first row contains field values. If that weren't there, the next page that we're going to see in the wizard here would be a little bit different. So I'm going to go next. And it says, okay, what do you want to call this first field? Okay, if the field names weren't there, this would be field 1, and you'd have to designate it. And now I have to designate its type, but notice there's no auto number here, so I can't make it auto number. So long integer works. Soda is short text, that seems appropriate. Right. Next it wants to know where's your primary key. All of this stuff was stored in the XML file, so it didn't have to ask, it was all stored in there. And finally, what do you want to call the table? Sodas. So we can do basically the same stuff. Right, here's my table sodas. Looks very similar. If we look at the data, identical. Okay, field names, etc. Now the field names, if I had captions and things, those would not have transferred over here, obviously, but they would with the schema, with the XML file. But one thing that's definitely different is to take a look in Design View. In Design View, things are a little different. Soda ID is not auto number, it's just a number. So I have to manually, if I want this to be auto number, go in here and change it. And it won't let me do it. I can't change it. So how do I fix that problem? I would delete this field completely, take all the data out, and then put it back in again. Right, I'm just going to leave it, but you get the idea. And the short text, notice the size is 255 characters. That's way too big. Right? You might remember from the XML that it was default sized to 15. So here, using an import of CSV, I have to do all that stuff manually. Going to lose data? Probably not. Should be in good shape. And again, the table itself doesn't look a whole lot different. The data is all the same. So the fact that these aren't auto number, not a big problem, but if I ever add another soda to my list here, I'm going to have to put my own number in there, or delete this column, add it back in again as auto number, and all of these should get the same numbers. And then from then on, any other ones will automatically get a new number. Okay. The last thing I want to show you is how to import new records and append them to an existing table when that existing table, I have some new customers that I want to add. Maybe a friend of mine has used Excel to enter some data, or a coworker has used Excel to enter some new customer data, and I want to add them to this list. But this is an auto number field, and that auto number field makes things a little bit tricky. I'm going to import. On my desktop, I have a CSV file of new customers. Right? Let's just take a quick look at it. Nothing much exciting in there, but we'll look at it just to see what kind of stuff is in there. It's just 2 records, but notice how this is formatted. There's an auto number field, and for every field in your table, you have to have in your data a placeholder for every single field, even if you don't want to import it. I don't want to import my auto numbers. I want Corbin and Betsy to get the next 2 numbers that are in the database. So what I had to do in order to make this work, and it took a little finagling on my part, is to put a comma at the beginning saying the first field is the auto number field. We're just going to ignore it. Okay, but it has to be in your import file. I've also done this with ones here. Doesn't matter what the number is because I'm going to ignore it. So then I said, well, maybe I can just leave it out altogether. And sure enough, that works as well. So this is my employee table. Remember, there's an auto number field, first name, last name, phone number. But in order to import these, I have to make sure that my data CSV file is formatted properly with a missing field at the beginning. This can also be the empty string. It can be anything you want it to be, really. Okay? So you'd have to train the person who's entering these new customers to, when they export as a CSV file in Excel, to include a blank column. Might be a little tricky for some people, but that's what I had to do. Now going back to access, there's another critical step, and this one took me digging through probably 25 different Google links saying mine it didn't work. I couldn't figure out why, and I finally discovered it. Before you can import into a table that's got an auto number field, you must do a compact. Now there's no repair going on here, but you have to do the compact. And I believe the reason for this is when you do auto numbers and you delete records, those numbers might try to get reused by the import, and that causes trouble. So before you do this import, you have to do the compact. Then we can do the import. So I'm going to go into table customers, and I'm going to import. Again, I can do this from external data as well. I'm going to import a text file. Where is it? It's on my desktop. It's called New Customers. Double click it, and I want to append this to the end of the customers table. So these are new customers, append them to an existing table instead of creating a new table. By the way, another way you could do this is to add them to a new table, cut and paste them from that table, and paste them into, or cut them to the clipboard, and then paste them into customers table. So another way to handle that. But I'm going to append these right away. Here's my data with a missing first field. This is going to cause all kinds of trouble unless you use the Advanced tab and tell it to skip the customer ID field. Do not try to bring those in. Okay. So now it's going to skip the first field and then get the first name, last name, phone number, and add them. So there's a couple of key steps there. First of all, put the blank field at the beginning with a comma after it, so just a comma, and then skip your auto number field. Next, it sees that, and I'm going to skip these, and it's filling those in the right places, comma separated file. Okay, going into table customers. Notice it didn't ask me about the field names because I'm appending it to an existing table. Finish, and hopefully no errors. Whew. If you get an error at that point, it says something about duplicate key values. This is the stuff I was fighting with for quite a while. Go back, compress first, then go through that process again. Let's go take a look at our customers, Control End, and there's Betsy and Corbin with brand new numbers. All right. That's a little tricky. And if you've been listening to all my other recordings, I'm a big believer in auto number fields, but auto number fields can make it difficult to import data from other places. But it can still be done.